Good morning again, everyone. I just thought once again I'd touch base and go over a few things. I've had some questions come at me and I thought I'd share them here as well as a few visual things. Tiana asked me a few things. Do we need site analysis at the beginning of the presentation? And a couple of other things. Let's see. Here's what I said. I said, assignment 3 asks you to resolve to a professional standard and show your evolved critical response and resolution of complex site issues and conditions and associated programmatic requirements. That's what assignment 3 asks for. So the answer to that, do you need site analysis at the beginning of the presentation? Yes, you will need to show some site analysis at the beginning or where it's relevant within your presentation. This is about you making strategic decisions about what to develop and what to let go of. So in keeping with this thinking, do you need to separate your 3 audiences? Also, Tiana asked me. And, this will need to be a decision made by you. I'm just reading off what I responded to within a Teams chat. A2, assignment 2, introduced this concept, but you must always filter your information to different audiences. So think what will work best for your project now. What I can say is that we will have council there. Maritza will be joining us, perhaps potentially with another person from council. But this assignment 3 is particularly about the next 3 years. There's some focus towards that, as well as those longer pictures. So you might want to think how you do talk about those 3 audiences you've given focus to, but what you're giving focus to in the next 3 years I suspect it won't, it'll be filtered towards council, but also the local audience. So all these things are a nuanced thing. I can't tell you exactly what to do. It depends what your focus is and where your project is coming from. And you will know, do you need to be sort of selling this, so to speak, to your very local audience, the people in the street, or is this a much bigger idea that you're beginning with? And you've sort of got a messaging to council, but a different messaging to local people. You may have a focus on an animal that you want to maintain. Well, again, how would you, think about how you're going to sell that to the different audiences. So I'm sorry if that answer sounds a little vague. Certainly A2 was very specific in asking you to present to 3 particular audiences, particular times. So A3 is less specific about that, but I still expect you to be very mindful of that and strategic. So that's my answer. A3 also asks you, to choose a current plan, one of your current plans. So, which one of your current plans are you choosing? Which is the most implementable? And why? So once you've made this key decision, it will help with analysis, what analysis to show, etc. Plus, what are the 3 stages of this plan over the next 3 years? So it's very soon, the next 3 years. What move could you make in the next 6 months if you're breaking that 3 years down? It might be 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, or it might be in the next 6 months, plus another in 2 years, or in 3 years, or it may be at high tide. This happens at contingent on low tide, contingent on high tide, contingent on a La Nina period, contingent on an El Nino period, a very dry period over the next 3 years. So you can make those decisions about what biases and emphasis you're going to give your project. Remember, you'll need 3 by 3 dimensional illustrative images showing existing and proposed, each with an overlay of a landscape performance measure on it. So perhaps these are about 3 years from now. Maybe one is 3 years from now, one's 30 years from now, and 75 from now. Or perhaps these are about 1 year from now, 2 years from now, and 3 years from now. What is very important here is that you use key site images that show a strong sense of reality. So those 3 illustrative images, think what's going to be the most powerful for your presentation. Lastly, you must rework your future plans and base this on water height level changes. So I'm going to say that again, and based on water height level changes, and which I've written specifically about in assignment 3. So we have been saying times, and I still think that's half relevant, But because we live with such ambiguity around sea level rise, I think you must begin to really align these interventions with water height levels and give an approximate time, about 50 years, about 150 years, but 0.84 of a metre or 0.5 of a metre, etc. And use a carbon calculator within one of these future plans. And these plans could be, 10, 20, 150 years away. You can make those decisions. Okay, now I also wanted to talk a little bit about this element and this sort of designing of furniture, and it's something that's come up in a couple of conversations with people in one-on-ones. So I asked about 3 precedent studies. So I've just put up here Le Corbusier, the architect Le Corbusier, the modernist architect Le Corbusier's sun lounge that he designed. Now this was very influential to, how do I get back here? This is very influential to myself and my design partner at the time, Leanne O'Shea, when we were designing, we were in the lucky position to be designing furniture and within our park that we were designing. And we based this sun lounge drawing from the Le Corbusier sun lounge and the ergonomics of that. And Le Corbusier designed his sun lounge for what's called modular man. So modular man is a 1920s modernist figure. I think you'll stay with me because I'm sharing my screen. Le Corbusier, modular man. And there's modular man. So he based it on these sort of exact proportions. Now those things, and it was for a private client, which is not what we were doing when we were doing Randazzo Park. We needed to be, and you need to be designing for the public. So what to do? How does one think about this? Well, what I can tell you is how we thought about it. Rather than modular man being whatever size he was, about 5'9" or something, we realised some people can be taller than that, and some people can be shorter. But when you're designing a sun lounge, the piece of the ergonomics of it that are important is the piece between your back. So we could extend the head of it and make it taller for taller people, but we needed to be quite mindful of that area between your backside, your bottom, and the bottom of your neck. And that needed to be more consistent. And the same with the length from your backside, your bottom, to the back of your knees. That needed to be a much more considered length. And when I look at this sun lounge now, 20 years later, I can see that it is. But we extended out the leg area and we extended out the head area. So that means we still accommodate for tall people and we still accommodate for shorter people. And in the public realm, that's what's important, and that's inclusive design. But so I would be thinking, if I was having to show precedent images around the design of this item, I'd be showing Le Corbusier's sun lounge, I'd be showing a modular man, I might be showing some other sun lounges, and how we looked at that. Now, also note the legs on this sun lounge. What we tried to do here is sort of make a suite of furniture so the park had an identity. And we also designed a picnic table and benches. And they all have the same curved stainless steel legs. This large picnic table we wanted to allow for wheelchair, and also the idea of, so you can take a wheelchair in at one end, but also the idea of you could stand at it and allow different sort of ways of using it really, and put flowers at one end and have 4 or 5 people sitting at it as well. Or, put a bowl of salad at one end. It's in a very congested suburban area of Melbourne in East Brunswick, and there's not a lot of there's no big gardens. There's a lot more space at Rockdale, let's put it that way. But certainly within that design, thinking about that element, I just thought I might talk about it a little bit here, because at this stage in A3, you're looking at these elements. But another key thing about that was the sighting of it, and that they sort of spoke to each other. Yes, that's what I said. That the two elements kind of have a conversation about each other. So the picnic table and the bench are at one end of the park, and the two sun lounges are at the other. And they are centred a little bit. The two sun lounges are sited and centred right in the middle of those two existing tall trees. So not only do the two tall trees give western shade in the hot afternoon sun, they are a little bit like football goals. And in Melbourne, everyone is very infatuated with AFL football, and we thought that there'd be young people kicking footies here. So we, just trying to think through specifics of your sites. What is a tree doing? Where is the shade? This takes us right back into what are fundamental assets. But again, on this issue of cohesion, I suppose, of your design, rather than thinking of, I'm going to do this element, I'm going to do a gathering space here, and I'm going to put seating along here, and this is big to look at the birds, and this. And how do you make those things speak to each other? And so these here at Randazzo Park with the sun lounge and the picnic table, we felt we also wanted it to be speaking to our very long benches. And so they all have a very similar kind of material quality about them with the steel and the timber. Here we had very long benches, over 50 metres worth, actually, which would be good if I had a better photo. Wouldn't that be good? There's a better photo. So that the benches, the long benches, became the whole edge of the park. They sort of held it. They also became gateway entrances to the playground. They became exits to the park. They became the lighting. So the light was the stainless steel mesh was within the seat itself, and the detailing of that every 5 metres, we had this kind of woman's stocking stitches or boots, and like laces. And so we were looking at ways that would be interesting, really. And at night the light comes on, and we designed this, Leanne O'Shea and myself designed this with Astrid Heward, who you've had speak to you about Septed, and this is exactly along Septed principles. It's exactly it. It's low lighting. Is it warm enough, Lando, in the warm tone of purple? Funnily enough, 22 or 23 years ago, I don't think we quite had that information. But it's still about low to the ground. We avoided having to have any additional sort of light poles. It was long term. We used fibre optics within it. But we were able to do that and put the money into that because it was a multi-singular element, a multifunctional singular element. So we could cost the bench and the lights all at one. So when you break everything up into separate things, you're at the mercy of costings. The more you can conglomerate things, so the more you have a gathering space that is also under a large tree, is also the light, is also the place where the bird hide is also the place where there's a bike rack, is also where there's a water fountain. Suddenly all those elements, you can start to think of a more bespoke design. But what if you're not? What if you're thinking of using much more existing municipal furniture? Funny, there is a great project, but I just cannot find any images of it. It was by a landscape architect firm called Deep End, who worked on Federation Square in Melbourne. And they did a project for Sydney Road, which is the large street down in Melbourne. But they used all local council planter boxes, but they put them all in very different configurations and put them vertical up street walls and all sorts of things. But I won't talk about it because I don't have images about it. What I do have some images about, if I can find them here, is a much more recent project. And yeah, it's right. And it is in Melbourne. Sorry, stick to me. Where is it? And it is in Melbourne, and it is down the dock. So I've spoken with a few of you about this, and I just thought I'd share it a bit more widely. So the project is Newquay Central Park, and it's right next to the Yarra River. And it's by my very, very good friend, Kath Stutterheim, when she was working with Charles Anderson. And I think they were also working with Aspect at the time. They won the state award for it only 12 months ago. Kath's now not working in that capacity, but they want the state award because of the scale of the whole development and because of COVID, a lot of things were delayed. But why I want to talk about it is this sort of site specificity around elements. So where you have, it's right next to the Yarra and there's possibilities of water moving around, and it's on top of an underground car park, but it's the most beautiful use of gabions I've seen in a landscape project. So gabions traditionally come from a water stabilizing, river stabilizing embankment form. And they were able to use gabions not only as the foundations of their seats, and that's some beautiful detailing there, where we have timber on top of these very robust materials. It's being a seat as well as a retaining wall. That image is over on the bottom left, where you see retaining wall, but it's also a seat. And there it is again there. This is just looking at next to it, but it's mixed with this sort of aesthetic of sort of playground or bush playground in the high-end apartments here. So there's a lot more money because of the development here. That's for sure. So, and I think the Rockdale corridor is a different thing altogether than this. But the idea that there's a consistency and the way the furniture speaks to the elements speak to each other. So the gabion wall becomes almost part of the playground. Here we have the gabion wall as more retaining wall. I'm just going to step you through this a bit more. It also becomes the most beautiful underground car park entrance I've ever seen. Here is a little video of it. So some beautiful gabion wall laying. There's other architects involved in this project. I apologise to them that I don't have their names with me. But again, the key element here is this sort of multi-use of one element. With the gabion, it's the edge of the car park. The trees almost, now have a kind of conversation with the poles of the building. This is just some of the other material quality, the concrete seating. Again, the gabion wall takes on different heights. It becomes different level changes, sort of seating as well. We're starting to see that might be all we have of the actual project. We start taking photographs of ourselves. But again, it's used all around. It's a very defining piece of that. And then the other one that we've already looked at before, but I'm just going to look at it again with this sort of same kind of way of talking about it, I suppose. I'm sorry, this is going to be very boring. I'm going to have to find it. Is the Susie Kumar and her sister, the Kumar sisters, project. I put this in a previous lecture, but again, this idea it's a bench that's still, there's something municipal about it, and like a sort of timber bench, but just by the change of the steel legs, by the colour, it just changes the whole context of it. And I think it's such a beautiful realisation of an idea, that project. So again, this, think about what you're using, the elements of the rubbish bin, except a light, what you might be doing. That we see this also happen in, where did I stash this away? It's very boring, isn't it? You have to put all these photos. I thought I had it somewhere there. I'll come back. We'll talk about the void in a minute. But, here is one I just grabbed off Pinterest, where some of you might be talking about a gathering space, but there's also seating that's separate. Why wouldn't you make it around a big tree? Or, why wouldn't you use the elements that are already on the site? And here we see this again, where you cite a landscape scale seating, how do you bring shade to that? Why does it, I feel I see in many of your projects, the seats over here, and then we've got shade structures over there. Why don't you just make the seat and the shade structure the same thing? It's cheaper. Use the trees that are there. They are your fundamental assets of the site. That's all. I'm going to come back to that void. These images here, after Ben spoke with us about AI, he very quickly went back to his office and sent me these images based on inundation of a suburb. I mean, these are quite dramatic and amazing and actually kind of beautiful. But and I look at them and, you know, I think, oh, these look like Hurricane Katrina, suburbs, you know, New Orleans housing. And so, you know, it comes sort of through an American AI scenario. But I think they're rather interesting images to just keep in your mind about the Rockdale wetland corridors. Could it look like this? Yes, I think it could. Would it last for a long time? Probably not. Short-term damage. This idea of sort of rubbish and sofas rotting is probably very, very possible in these sites. But, you know, this is the kind of, what are we going to do in the next 3 years? Who are my audiences? You know, this is the kind of image that you might be suggesting to council, but perhaps not showing and scaring, because we don't like to scare anyone. This is back to this optics question, local people. But you could keep these images in your own personal designer mind when you're designing something like the foundations of a rubbish bin or a seat or a gathering space or a shade structure. Is it movable? Is it robust enough? I'm not sure if you can see me. Let's see. Where am I? I know I'm sharing my screen. Oh, and while I'm still sharing my screen, and I will finish this in a minute, I wanted to just also mention Voigt Landscape Architects, their Novartis campus project. Let's have a look at some of the images of it, but with this same idea of furnishings, walls, bins, lights. It's on top of a car park, this project. It's a beautiful project. And there's a deep history to why they're sort of deep thinking why they're building these walls like this. But these walls are made out of concrete, but they're made to look exactly, well, not exactly, but like Swiss weathered mountains. And the fabrication drawings of these are quite extraordinary. But this idea of very site-specific, customized, bespoke design elements coming into your projects. And I don't mean that versus municipal. I know in A2 I asked you to look at sort of the fittings of existing municipal ones. That doesn't mean you stop thinking about bespoke design, site-specific design of the site. The trick here is to think, how do I use those construction givens of the council, and how do I tweak that or work with that? I don't think this project is doing that, but some projects do. Certainly Sue Bardwell's, what am I saying? Bardwell Valley. Sue Barnsley, Prince Alfred Park certainly does. And even this project here, the whole thing is on a concrete slab on top of a car park. So there was a use of concrete is very much part of it. So it is in fact using, even though you can't tell, it is in fact using a construction technique that's already happening on site. It's kind of not adding an extra layer. I think they're the main projects I just wanted to touch into. I'll come back to Teams. I'm not sure where I am and if you can see me, but there's this lovely thing that popped on my screen. I thought, oh, let's just have a look at it. Oh, I wish I could get this to work a little quicker. This is very boring for you, isn't it? But it's on the Dezeen. It's on the Dezeen, DEZEEN Instagram account. It comes to me, but it's a small little building on rail lines. So it's very movable. It's a little work studio. I'm sorry, this image is probably just awful for you and back to front. But the idea of mobility, or the idea of being able to deconstruct some of your elements if there is a flood, or how they'll work in flood, or how they'll work in level changes monthly. I think the idea and a way of thinking about some of that is really interesting. And you're not architects, and nor am I. And we don't need to be in this scenario, but I think we do need to think of creative ways to deal with this inundation landscape. And I thought this is a pretty cool little item. That's all I've got for you for now. Good luck with the final week. Bye.